I want to get to some of these news stories, but last week we referenced this briefly, that California's single-payer legislation is basically stalled, sidelined specifically by the California Assembly Speaker, Anthony Rendon, who shelved it, at least for this year. Now, people should see this in context. First off, Rendon, I should say, is clearly sort of making it easier for some of the more conservative members of the California Assembly to avoid a vote. However, with that said, and the bill is SB 562, David Dayen did a really good piece on this that I think lays out the argument, but lays out the argument in what I think is a very succinct and clear way, that the bill as presented was never going to go anywhere because California has, in response to Proposition 13, which we've talked about on the show, because it came to Massachusetts, Proposition 13, back in the 80s. In fact, and it basically said it limited the amount of property taxes that could be raised, and it decimated the schools in Massachusetts. I presume it did something like that in California. But I remember the year that happened. Well, in 1988, there was a response to California's Proposition 13, which was Proposition 98. And it required that roughly 40% of all the general fund revenues in California's general fund go to K through 12 education. So understand what that means. I'm just going to use simple numbers here because I don't know the California budget numbers, and they're much bigger than this. But and I've got to keep everything in round numbers because I don't want to have to involve math in this too specifically.
Yeah, we've got to maintain
But if you have
here.
$100 million budget, at least $40 million of it needs to go to education. To raise the taxes for single-payer health care, I'm going to pick a number in this little hypothetical world I'm talking about. Let's say you need $100 million more to pay for single-payer health care in California. So now the general budget is $200 million, which means statutorily that $80 million needs to go to education. In other words, of the $100 million that you raised to pay for single payer, $40 million of that is taken away. So you'd actually need to raise $200 million, or like closer to $150 million, $160 million to pay for the $100 million for single payer. So what needs to happen in California is there needs to be a referendum, because California is all referendum-y, that either provides a permanent waiver when it comes to revenues derived specifically for single payer, or unshackles them from that dynamic. And Dayen makes the argument in this piece that that even though this guy Rendon certainly is a bit of a corporatist and certainly protecting his assembly members, but no one in the community who is arguing for this, none of the big constituencies, the California Nurses Association, which is a very strong union out there. The nurses unions across the country are great. California's not exactly the same as the national one, but these are very aggressive, very strong, and good unions. It's just that Dayen is saying that there are outside groups and even the union is not being honest with supporters of single payer and wasting, in many respects, the energy that's going in there for something that they know the process in which they're following cannot lead to this, because there is a constitutional problem in California. So the bottom line is people need to be more honest with what they're doing instead of just trying to whatever gain they're trying to get out of this. I mean, it's not hard to look at some of these outside groups and say, hey, I understand what the value is for them. They can keep saying, send us money to promote single payer, when they know it can't happen unless this referendum is addressed, and they're not telling the people that they're raising money from, and they don't seem to have any plans to raise the enormous amount of money you need for a statewide referendum. So there's a little bit of disingenuousness involved in this. And you can see this down the line, right? It's a freebie. I don't think Dayan's in any way apologizing for Rendon, but it is a way for a lot of people to take sort of a free shot without really genuinely either knowing what they're talking about or specifically not informing their constituencies for what it's actually going to take. And that's a recipe for a lot of people becoming disenchanted and disillusioned in the process. You promise them a pie in the sky, and you don't tell them, oh, but we got to spend a lot of time building a ladder. It's just as if the pie in the sky is going to descend down. No, you're going to have to climb up there. If you don't tell people what's involved in it, you're going to see that once it doesn't show up, they're going to become disillusioned and walk away from the whole process. Hi, folks. Sam Seder here. We still need your help on our Patreon page. YouTube ads have come back, but not nearly as much as we had before. So if you can help us out, any little bit helps. Head over to our Patreon page right at this URL, and you'll help us keep helping you by making videos